I'd like to officially welcome you to Stay Focused and Get Results using TheBrain 11 for advanced knowledge capture and planning. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I'm co-hosting today's event with Matt Caton, our Director of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And as Shelley mentioned, we will be taking turns on the chat window or the question panel in the GoToMeeting window. So feel free to ask any questions you have during the webinar today. We've got a very, very full class today, so we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. But feel free to post in the questions. Either Shelley, myself, or Jay Ofemi from our support team will be answering your questions for you today.
Yeah, and that is on the questions panel. Due to the volume of attendees, you will automatically be muted. So feel free to chat with your colleague, comment, but we do want to hear from you. And we have 2 audio modes as well, as I mentioned earlier. So feel free to have us stream through your computer speakers or call in our conference line. So with that, I am going to get started. The format, what we're going to do is I'm going to start off a little broad and give you some examples of knowledge capture, business planning in TheBrain 11, of course, and then Matt's going to dive quite a bit deeper into all those nitty-gritty features. So we're going to start very broad and then move very specific, but that being said, we're happy to adjust as accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my Brain on Focus. And Matt, I just want to make sure you can see my screen.
I can, yes, it looks great.
All right, well, we are certainly living in a brave new world, of course, and we all have many challenges in the new world context. We have a lot of information coming at us, and I know I've talked to colleagues. Many of us are working for remote, or some of us in essential services are still in our office. So what we want to show you today is we really want to empower you. We hear from users all the time, well, I have so much information out there, whether it's on my file drive, whether it's news bits streaming and at me, sometimes hitting you in the face, but it doesn't really have the meaning and context. And the reason it doesn't always have the meaning and context is because it needs to be assimilated in a way that represents your unique perspective and provides that meaningful context. And that's what TheBrain visual links and interface is all about. So what I want to start off with before we get into specific theories on focus, and the way we do get that focus is by creating a contextual environment for our information, is I'm just going to start off with a few general brains to give some of our maybe newer users on the call just a broad overview of the whole idea and premise behind the software. So pieces of information in the brain are what we call thoughts. And a thought can represent any type of digital information. And we can use these thoughts to create a broad network of whether it's your business, maybe it's just your personal passions on, style and culture or that kind of thing, or your house projects, or maybe it's, project management, keeping you in the know. These are all things that you can do in your brain. And the nice thing about the brain is when I'm on one topic, it shifts and it presents me with a context-rich associative display of my information. And in that way, if I'm busy and I'm getting distracted, I literally just want to hone in on that active thought, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm looking at my 10,000-foot active projects, and that's going to give me the context I need. Now, one of the advantages of the brain is that you can have one piece of information effectively organized and categorized under multiple categories. So unlike your file folder structure, where you kind of have to decide, do I want to put my projects under maybe my David Allen theory, horizon of focus? Are they current projects under my business? Well, in this case, you can see I have all the topics in one place. And just to step back, every time I click on a thought, I'm triggering all related pieces of information. Anything below my active thought, these are my children or subcategories of information. So as we start to build that visual knowledge base, and that's one of the things, one of our bullets in our webinar that we're going to be talking to you about how to build that robust visual knowledge base, you want to start with a broad set of categories that represent your world, whether that's your business, whether that's your project world, whether that's the world today with a pandemic. It's all relevant, and it can all go in the brain. So below my business development thoughts, I have Industry Watch. So I'm clicking on that thought, and that triggers more information. So here I've got links to competitors, for instance. And this particular brain, I'm actually a mock web interactive firm here, so you can see that I've got different competitors listed. And that's also under top of my mind, which takes me to another section. So one of the nice things about the brain is I could have got to those competitors, not just from my business development category, but from my competitor standpoint as well. Now, in terms of maintaining your focus, if somebody calls me and I have a client, let's say it's about the Red Cross client that we're working with, I can simply type in the first couple letters in the brain search, and it's going to pull up all the documents as well as thoughts that might be relevant to that particular project. So that's really nice too if you need to shift. So I might be on working really hard on my competitive research, and all of a sudden Matt calls me, hey, Red Cross, I have a meeting with Red Cross in an hour. What do you got on them? And so boom, what I can do is simply click on that thought, and now I'm in my Red Cross universe, and I can see very quickly that they are a VIP client, and here's the information. Now, this context-driven interface is especially more relevant now that we are working remote. This particular brain is actually synced to the cloud, and I can share this, and I have people looking at this brain with me. So if I have new hires or normally things that we might do in the office that we're now doing remote, I can see very well my virtual office becomes my thought space in my brain. So here, what I'm looking at is I can see all relevant information, and the top half of the screen is the visual interface. The bottom half is our area for content. So if I want to go ahead and go to my new customer service project, for instance, I can see that I've got documents, I've got training resources here, and I can, of course, click on that document and launch it. I can go ahead and add new documents or thoughts to that as well. So let me just go ahead and do that really quick. So let's say I want to go ahead and create a brand new 2020 customer service project. I'm going to come in here, and now you might notice that the Brain 11 interface is much faster and responsive. So it's got a lot of smoother animation, and that's all new, and that's a current release. And our notes section is quite different as well. We've got some really cool bells and whistles. So I'm just going to start jotting down my ideas. Now it is very important that we all use our chat program. So just some ideas and increase customer service. So I've got that note in my brain. I can do a lot with different styles and different formatting for notes. But for now, I just want to show you that I've got that note. And this note can be linked to other things. Maybe I actually want to assign it to somebody in my brain who has a lot of experience. So I'm just going to type the first couple names of, first couple letters of Fred's name, and there's Fred. And I'm going to make a connection. So now what I'm doing is I'm building context around my new project that I'm working on, which is my 2020 customer service project. And I want to get Fred's involvement. It does relate a little bit to some work we're doing with Red Cross. So I'm just going to start typing in Red Cross, and it actually relates to a case study we did with them. So I'm going to go ahead and make a connection and leverage another thought and another document that I had in a different project in this project as well. And you can see how nice it is to discover information through the search and through typing in those first couple letters and making connections to build that context. So a couple things we might want to do for the customer service project. I might need to hire a survey firm to help me conduct my surveys. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I probably need to outline a budget for this project. So I'm going to go ahead and create another thought. And I'm just dragging from the little circle we call gate. So I'm going to call this 2020 customer service budget. And then I can just use the semicolon to go ahead and create another thought. And I'm going to call this thought New Horizons for Client Acquisition. So just a couple ideas that I'm working on. I want to create a thought for that. So I've got my thoughts in my brain. And now I've just added several ideas that might go. Now, hiring a survey firm, that's going to involve IT. So I'm actually going to link this to the IT section in my brain. And that's going to go under IT research because we do a lot of research on, who we hire when it involves information technology and so forth. So I've got that there under IT research, and that takes me to IT. So from there, you can see how you can very quickly build a context. Now, what do I do if I have information that's out there on the web? For instance, there's a really nice site, and I'm just going to switch gears to a different brain example called Science Heroes that I absolutely love. This particular brain has all kinds of information on how many lives over the years scientists have saved, vaccines, all kinds of fun things. And I thought this would be a good example today because obviously we're dealing with some very serious issues with the COVID-19 pandemic, but this is also putting it in context, which, we hopefully through our social distancing and some innovation we'll make it through this. So here in this particular website, things are listed in a chronological importance. They have lots of numbers, but that doesn't really work for my type of research. So I've recontextualized this particular website under Science Heroes to match what works for me. So for instance, if I'm interested in medical techniques, maybe it's oral rehydration therapy, sterile surgical procedures, now I can see I have a link to this particular person on this website, and I'll just give it a second for that website to load. And I have it loading in the context, and this is kind of interesting because, of course, in 1827, and not unlike today, the advice was wash your hands. Washing your hands, just like it's important now, was a major surgical invention in 1827, and that was pioneered by Joseph Lister. So this is kind of interesting. And this is also to do with public health and public education. So I'm going to create a new thought in this brain called public health. And now I can go ahead and link that wherever I want to put that. So I can actually create a pin. So what a pin is that goes ahead and it puts it on the top of where of all my key items in this brain. But I'm also going to go ahead and go to the root thought, and I'm going to link public health right under this particular thought here. And here we go. So now I've got this particular new topic, this new category on public health, and I've got obviously a historical reference to public health. And of course, I can go out and get more information on public health by doing a search web feature. So what I can do in the brain now is continue to build and aggregate. I can drag and drop more links from my Science Heroes site, for instance. So if I want to go ahead and link Edward Jenner, I actually have Edward Jenner already in my brain. So I can go ahead and make a connection to him. Let me just go ahead and link let's see here, Gaston Raymond under public health. Let's get rid of this search thing because I want to link some information. I simply drag and drop the URL under the thought that I want to do it. In this case, I already have that, so I'm just going to go ahead and just add it again so you can see how that works. And that creates a link to that particular web page. And that works also for relative paths. So if you have intranet sites on your company that you need to get to, any web data, and there's so much web data out there, you can go ahead and drag and drop. And In terms of building my research knowledge base, I really like to use the search web feature under options. It's also F4. So what it does is it takes my active thought, the thought in the center, and I can go ahead and start a search. So from there, if I want to go into, this is searching on surgical procedures. I can also search on public health. And maybe go into the news items for that day. I can go ahead and add information on that. So if I want to go ahead and add an article from LA Times on public health, I can go ahead and just drag and drop that connection into the brain. And you can see how quickly and of course there's a lot of interesting information right now going on there, but I can go ahead and drag and drop stuff into the brain very nicely. And then from here, I've got a section on vaccines, which is also something related to public health. So I've gone ahead and made a connection. And you can see that's how things get built by me taking some different information. I've got some news sites. I've got a site that could documents. Let me go ahead and drag a document in. Let me drag this cost spreadsheet. Maybe I'm doing some planning, and drop that in. And it's all done by drag and drop. It's very easy to drag and drop that. Just pull that up so everyone can see how that's done. So I'm just going to drag in this PDF on Generation Z. So maybe I'm thinking about public health and how it affects different age demographics. I can go ahead and now I've got that PDF in my brain, and I might want to relate this back to children. I can make a connection there. Science for children. No, Generation Z are exactly kids, but you can see how that fits together. And I'm just building and connecting, and then what ends up happening is I get a very powerful network. Now, not only for knowledge base, but the brain visual links in version 11 are also can be used quite nicely to represent business processes and workflows. So I'm just going to show you one more example before I pass presenter to Matt to dive in a little deeper. On this particular example is a financial services company. Again, this is very relevant when people are now more remote, working remotely, because you want to keep your processes in place. So that becomes a little bit more hard if you can't run over to somebody's desk all the time. So what you can do is actually visualize your business processes in the brain. So in this particular example, this company has a structured process for closing deals. They invest in different technology and health sciences companies. So first of all, they do their due diligence. Then they do structuring, where they structure the deal. Then they have an underwriting phase where they look at underwriting the particular investment, and then they close the deal, which gets into escrow and funds transfer. And so all these steps are represented as the parent-child jump in a particular brain. And what this does is it helps people who are just getting up to speed, or if I can't do this particular deal, I can send this deal over to somebody else, and they're going to know how to do it. I can also see which deal is in a different phase in this particular company. So this is just another example of how you can use the thoughts and the visual interface to go ahead and create that environment. And then finally, just to close on focus, the brain, of course, is going to help you get more focus. And there's a number of different methodologies that you can use when you're building your brain. You know, we have a lot of people practicing GTD. And I think this is really relevant, where David Allen has certain tips that you can, that he talks about to avoid burnout. He's actually a best-selling author, a brain user, and a productivity expert. His theory is all about getting things done, for those of you that don't know who David Allen is. And this is very relevant to the brain. Now, if you don't want to use the brain, you can do this on a piece of paper. You can build a knowledge base in any way. So we're hoping you're going to use our software to do this. That's why it's designed. But if you don't, you can still take these principles and, do it on a notepad. It doesn't work quite as well. But the main thing is to clarify your commitments. And again, you're going to do that in the brain. That project thoughts that I had, that's helping me clarify my commitments, organize and review, reflect, and then, of course, make judgments. Now, with this GTD methodology, he offers, and this is getting back to my visualization of processes, a natural planning model. So this goes from outlining purpose, mission, next action items, to brainstorming, to then going ahead and then starting on that project. So whether you're using sort of a DBL equity brain where you have phases, or you want to actually enumerate different thoughts to create a project plan, that's another way to do it. And then another nice way to kind of think about your brain right now, especially when we have so many things on our mind, is horizons of focus. Now, the whole concept here is sometimes we're operating at runway level. Runway level is a very basic level where it's literally like, okay, is my Amazon fresh order in today? What am I going to do to entertain my preschooler while I'm working from home? To current projects, which might be the launch of our next technology, to areas of responsibility, which is, I need to check in on my parents as well as make sure my kids are getting educated properly and we're practicing social distancing. So this is an area that you can have in your brain, for all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, your 1 to 2 year goals, your 3 to 5 year goals, and then 50,000-foot life goals. This is talking about the kind of person we want to be. You can actually get into religious and philosophical beliefs there. And this all, of course, you can zoom in and out of your horizons of focus in the brain. So just to show you kind of what that would look like in reality, moving from that theoretical brain, which I'm happy to share with anyone who wants to dive deeper into that, to the reality is I'm just going to activate, and I love using this cert, my own horizons of focus in this brain. So I'm just going to type in the first couple letters and click on horizons of focus. So again, in this particular brain, I actually have a section on GTD, and I took you immediately into my active projects. That's in David Allen's GTD methodology. That's the 10,000-foot brain. And that's where a lot of us, especially the business users, and we have a lot of business users on this call, are going to hang out. That's happening right there, as well as teachers and educators and students, because I know we have a lot of ed tech people, users as well. But the other areas, just to give you some ideas of what that could look like, is 20,000-foot areas of responsibility. You might be a parent. You might have community involvement, a caretaker to a brother or sister or a parent. And then, of course, your 30,000-foot 1 to 2 year goals, buying a car, eventually, hopefully, when it's safe, doing some travel. 40,000-foot goal, this is your 5-year vision. That might include anything from finances to retirement planning. And again, the thing I love about the brain is I'm literally merging my theoretical and conceptual view with the practicalities of this. So while I'm in David Allen's lofty horizons of focus, which is really cool, I'm actually going to click on my 401k strategy, and this actually has real information linked on, what do I do now? And of course, that's linking to my investments, which I know that's also a little bit interesting. But, obviously we had some challenges in 2008. We have that again today. So I like to hash this all out in my brain because it helps me think more clearly, and it actually alleviates tension and anxiety. I have it out here. I've worked it out, not just in my head, but in a trusted source where I can reflect on it. And that's also important because that means I can put it away. I've looked at what I can do for my investments. I've looked at what I can do for my 401k. Now I'm just going to get back to work. I'm going to get back to my active projects, or, I'm going to spend some time with my daughter, that kind of thing, and that's how you can kind of keep it together and keep it all focused in the brain. Now, to dive even deeper into those Brain 11 features that enable us to do this even more effectively, I'm going to pass presenter over to you, Matt, unless there's any other questions on anything I presented.
Great. Well, we do have plenty of questions, but some of them are specifically about all these new features that we have in the notes.
Okay.
And the new Brain 11 features. So I'm happy to share my screen. I'll take presenter now. This is really just a sample Brain that I created to really highlight some of the new features in the Brain 11. So one of the main features of version 11 is the notes have been rewritten from the ground up, recreated from the ground up. And the notes are just a fantastic way to quickly capture information. As you saw in Shelley's demo, I take my Brain with me into meetings on-site with clients. I work from home with the Brain. I'm on a call, and I can quickly jump onto a thought and quickly start adding some information. And the notes are intended to be, again, easy to capture information, but to lay out in a consistent manner throughout your entire Brain that you create. And I always remind people, particularly on my Brain 101 classes that I have every week, when you're working with the notes, it's really up to you to decide, and this question already came up in our GoToMeeting question panel, do I add this piece of information in a file attachment on a thought or into the notes? And that is a personal choice, depending on how comfortable you are using the notes or how complicated the content may be. If you are designing a wedding invitation or putting together a calculated cells in an Excel spreadsheet with for a end-of-year sales report, then it's probably best to add a file attachment into your Brain rather than adding something into your notes. That being said, let me share with you some of the notes features now. I'm going to jump into a customer that I'm working with and called Delta, and let's just jump into projects. And I've got these community outreach project thoughts, and you'll see very, very quickly as I create a new these are sort of like the magic they have on a cooking show. We bake the bread, we stick it in the oven, and then take out the finished bread a second later. So I'm going to design a note, and you'll see how complex or how detailed it can be with all of the buttons available in one of these other finished thoughts in just a moment. But for now, I'm actually starting from scratch with a blank note. Now, the first thing to point out in the Brain notes is that the Brain notes are designed to use Markdown. And Markdown, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very popular method for formatting text in a way that if you don't have a Markdown reader, the text is still perfectly legible. If you're familiar with HTML, for example, if you don't know HTML, but you look at a page written in HTML, it might as well be Greek. It's completely foreign. There's so many tags and characters and special characters and lines being used. It's very complex. Markdown answers that question, and it displays information in a very, very legible form. So I'm just going to start off by saying, here's my Delta Corporation Outreach. That's sort of my title, my subheading, project review. And you can see as I go, I can continue adding text, but there's a couple of key characters that I can use to format this data. Now, at this point, I'll remind you, if you're not familiar with Markdown, you don't want to use Markdown, all of the buttons, as you can see, are still available for the formatting features. So if you want bold text, that's not a problem. I can highlight this text and click on bold. Now you notice it added the formatting that I wanted for me, and that's the two little asterisks that appear at the beginning and at the end of the line, and that creates bold text. And when I click away from the mouse, you can see that the Markdown tags are no longer displayed. That's the default setting, so when your cursor is not focused in the notes, the Markdown tags are not displayed. But when you're formatting and you're typing, they'll be there, but they're not intrusive whatsoever. It's just a couple of little asterisks that lets you know that is bold text. And the great thing about it, I think, is that this can be formatted on the fly. So if you don't want to use the buttons and you are familiar with Markdown, and I want to make this a heading, I can add a pound sign and do a space, and it makes a heading. So headings, subheadings, or in this case, it's actually a title. If I were to add 2 pound signs and a space, then it's a heading. Project review, I'll do 3 pounds. So pound, 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 and a space, and it becomes a subheading on that line. And when I hit enter, it creates a new line, and it's back to normal text. So a couple more key features to share just to make you familiar. If you do 1 asterisk and the date, for example, what is today? March 25, and an asterisk, let's add 2020, and an asterisk and hit enter, it italicizes. And if I start a new line with, again, double asterisk and say discovery phase, and double asterisk, I've made that bold. So inline formatting, once you get familiar with these, and of course you can always use the buttons to see what you should be adding to help you along the way, you get the hang of it very, very quickly, and you can very quickly format a very nicely laid out note. Another key thing that we like to use, Shelley and I particularly, I think I saw Shelley using some in her demo, checklists. Checklists are a really, really great way to stay on top of projects that you're working on, which tasks are complete, which aren't. If you want to add a checklist, you can obviously just use the button in the Notes toolbar, or I can simply add a sort of a dash and a space, and that adds a new checkbox. So outline key goals, and the checkbox there, employee input. And here, let's delete the checkbox. And if I want an already checked off item, I can add, instead of the minus sign or the dash, I can add a plus and a space, and that's a checked off item. So this task is already done, but I want to document that it was one of the tasks that was completed by someone on the team. Assemble a community okay. And of course, you can still, if you don't want to use the plus and dashes, you can add those, just hover over and check and uncheck items off the list. Another really great feature of the notes is that tables have returned. I'm very excited about this. I use a lot of tables in my notes. I used to back in, if you're a longtime user of TheBrain, you might remember TheBrain 7, TheBrain 8, we had tables in the notes. Those went away for a period of time. Tables are back. And once again, we can just click on the Insert Table button, and I'm already on my way. But for those of you that want to know, tables are created simply by separating words with, it's called the pipe symbol. So sort of above the Enter key, just the straight up and down line. If I type in a pipe symbol and then type in some text, so, and space and add another pipe symbol, you can see I've started now on my table. And I can, hit tab to enter a new cell. And here's the need, tab, new cell, interest level, tab, and the cost. And of course, if I really want to space this out, I can simply put my cursor in there, add spacing, what have you. And when I hit enter at the end of the line, that's going to start the new cell down below. So the need is a level 8, 8, and the interest level is a level 7. It really doesn't matter the content, but you can see I'm just in the cost. Let's say that's going to be 500. And enter, and I start my new cell down below. Or if I place my cursor there and delete, I clear out that cell. So I can keep going on, down, down, and down, adding new cells on the right, or new rows just by going to the end of the cell and hitting enter, or manually using those pipe symbols to create my table. And then one last component that I want to share with you. Let's say we are collecting, I've got a pipe symbol there, collection of, now I actually did that on purpose, misspelling collection, because you can see that spell check is available. That can be turned on and off, just a setting up above. Turn it off, on and off your spell checking in notes. And my collection of graphics. So I'm also going to add images into the notes as well. And I like to simply add images by cutting and pasting. I'll show you in just a moment what, if you want to type in everything manually, if you know where this image is, and you're a heavy keyboard user, for whatever reason you don't want to drag and drop, you can manually type in information to point your note to a graphic and insert a graphic. I am simply going to grab this graphic and drag and drop down to where my cursor was, and let go, and notice that I've got this graphic. When you click on the graphic in the note, you can also resize as well. So, and I'm going to select the graphic and center this up. So you can see the center code is : to center something. If I want to go to the far right and manually enter that, it's --. So again, you simply get the hang of these settings or these characters really quickly, and you can change them manually to adjust the layout and the formatting of your note. And then I'll just add one more, just so you can see I can also right-click and copy something onto my clipboard. So I do this from the web a lot when I find an image online, and I just want to paste it in. It can be pasted in this way as well. And again, click to resize. So now let's do that magic cooking show trick. I've done a couple of formatting options that are available in version 11. And let's go out to my finish. This is what I was working towards building, but you didn't want to see me type this out word for word. But oh, and I took my graphics out of here. I was going to add my graphics in on, so I'll just drag and drop now to add those graphics. So you can see very, very quickly you can create and develop notes. And again, when my cursor is not in the note, the markdown tags or the syntax is not visible. But when I click into the notes, you can see some of that syntax does become available. And to take a look,
that might be actually good to note, because a couple people have said they can't see the notes in the way you're seeing them. So
okay, so there is a setting in the brain, and let me share that with you now. I'm going to click on Options and go into Preferences. If you're a Mac user, click on the Brain Preferences, and there is a new tab in version 11 specifically for the Notes editor. And here are all the features that you need to adjust the sort of the behavior of the notes. The line spacing, if you're using emojis, that's a setting really on a Mac. You can adjust the emoji size. But this is what we've referenced a few times, hide system tags when inactive. So the notes are inactive, but the tags are still there. But if I select hide system tags, then those system tags or markdown tags, the syntax will not be visible once I click out of the note. So that's an important setting to adjust if you want your note to be displayed very cleanly when the cursor isn't there. And of course, when you print this out, I happen to print this page out as we were just by clicking on that print button really quickly. And if you can still see me in the camera, I've got my camera there I am. So you can see it prints out without all of the syntax there. So very, very easy to
nice print.
to print that.
We had another user ask about converting that note into a PDF, since you're talking about printing.
Yes, great. Another feature. Good transition, Shelley, because that is another version 11 feature, is to actually format your note as a PDF or export it as a PDF. And we've got a special button just for exporting as a PDF right here in the Notes panel or Notes toolbar. So I just simply click, and I can open this in a browser. This is particularly nice because, you know, if I ever need a script for a presentation, or I just want to view some content while I'm in a different area of my brain, I'll often click on Open in Browser, and it opens this content, and it just happened to open for me on another monitor, in a browser window. So I've got all of my content there available for me, and I can click elsewhere in my brain, navigate away from that thought, but still have that content open in the browser. Let me share with you now another, I think, really fantastic upgrade to TheBrain 11, and that is, again, speaking of PDFs. So not only can we export this note that we've created, I can just click export as a PDF, save that, and send it off to a group of colleagues or some friends. But also the way TheBrain handles PDFs now is just a fantastic update within the application. So let's say with this community outreach, I've got a few PDFs here on my desktop. I'm simply going to drag and drop them to create a new thought in my brain. This thought has a PDF attachment. And notice that I'll give this a little more screen real estate now. This PDF, the preview is automatic in version 11. So I have an automatic preview of this PDF. I can scroll through this document. I can scroll through over on the left, a nice little column to select a particular page that I want to jump to. I can search within the PDF. I can actually zoom. So if I really need to zoom in on phase 2 of 5, I can zoom into that and zoom back out. So change the orientation, etc. So the PDF preview in TheBrain 11 is just a fantastic update. Makes it really, really easy to create a nice brain with a nice display and access PDFs very, very easily. Another file type that has been enhanced with its compatibility in TheBrain 11 are sound and video files. And actually, I happened to notice a lot of people were writing in today saying, oh, I use TheBrain for organizing all my video files with my team, or sound files for little sound bites for education, for online classes.
Yeah, we got lots of couple questions on the Q&A about adding videos, even for publishing online today.
Yes, and so you're in luck because TheBrain 11 has enhanced features for video and audio playback. And once again, there's a setting in TheBrain. I'll share that with you in just a moment. If you want the video to automatically start playing when you go to that thought, or if you want it to just be paused on the start screen and then you manually click on play. But here I just have a couple of MP4 files. I went with video and audio. So MP4, I'll click and drag. And I actually have my machine audio turned down so you won't hear this. But you'll notice I drag and drop, and I get a nice display right here in where this attachment is. So it's an MP4 attachment. And I can click on play to start playing. I don't have my sound turned up, so we can't hear anything. But this is a recording from a recent meeting. And I'll drag and drop. This is another feature that I want to share with you. And here, instead of dragging and dropping into the content area, I dragged and dropped into the bar up above. And this is just a sample video file to see that I've got multiple videos attached with the same thought. And I can jump from video to video. I can play. I can pause, roll back 10 seconds, etc. But all access without leaving the application. So this is a really, really great enhancement if you're creating a brain. We've been talking with a lot of people about online education that's happening now, things of that nature. Even my kids are incorporating in their brain, of course they use TheBrain, videos that are being sent from their teachers onto their subjects so they can keep track of different videos and just play that video right there without ever leaving the TheBrain application. And this transitions me into another feature, yet again, of TheBrain 11, and that is multiple notes on a file attachment, or excuse me, on a thought. So in the past, if you're a pro user of TheBrain, if you have a pro license, you know that you can have multiple file attachments on a single thought. So on a single thought, I can have a company's web page along with the contract and some other documentation all on the same thought, Well, now we can have multiple notes. So here, maybe I'm taking a note on, what it is we like and dislikes of these video options. So I'm going to keep a little note down below. Let's say I share this brain with Shelly, and Shelly appreciates all of my feedback. She doesn't want to overwrite that content because we're going to be sharing it with the same or more people on the team. Shelly can actually
I appreciate all your feedback. Send it my way.
So I've clicked to add a new attachment, and I'm adding a second note. Now I'm pretending I'm Shelly, so here's Shelly's notes. So Shelly creates a new note, and here is some really smart stuff.
Good.
To think about. So really quickly, I can just paste that in, and multiple notes on a single thought. Now, as we share this brain with more colleagues, they can create their own note tab on the same thought, so we can get everybody's feedback, and everybody has sort of a little home to go to, some accountability on their thoughts on that particular meeting or that particular topic or project that they're working on. So having multiple notes per thought is just again, just a really nice enhancement to the Brain 11, particularly in those team environments when multiple people are contributing and everyone's hesitant to, well, I don't want to overwrite this. Maybe I should just put it down at the bottom of the note, but then other people might miss it. I'll put it at the top and push this content down that's on the note, and then it looks like there's a priority level. Having multiple notes is a great way for everyone to contribute. So that being said, let's go ahead now and talk about collaboration within a brain. We had a lot of questions, and I believe Tom, I know Jan asked the question about sharing brains both within a team brain environment. We'll talk about that in just a moment, as well as if you don't have team brain, but yet you've created a brain that you want to share with others. You've got many, many options with the Brain application, and I'll try to review them really, really quickly. If you'd like to know more, again, contribute onto the GoToMeeting question panel or contact us at support@thebrain.com, and we'll take our time and share all the different options with you. But first and foremost, we can sync our brains to the cloud, and that is so important, particularly in this day and age. So many of us are working remote. That's understood, and we need access to all of our data, whether we're on our traveling laptop, if we are popping into the office, but mostly working from home, and we need our brain in both locations. Sync your brain to the Brain cloud. Everything that I've done here on my brain is, today, as you're seeing, is local, but I can simply click on this sync button up above, and this syncs the brain up to app.thebrain.com. So let's go ahead and open app.thebrain.com. Sorry, I've got multiple windows open. There it is. And so we can log into the Brain. This is a page that I missed sharing with you. Really, really quickly, just rolling back to that Markdown that I talked about. If you're looking for a Markdown reference guide, you want to know more about Markdown, we have the Brain Markdown reference guide. It's off of the Brain 11 page. You should be able to find this without any problem, and it goes through every button and what the actual code is that you're entering into the MD file. So you can do Markdown in your notes inline typing. So let's go ahead and log into, I'm going to log into my Brain account. And these are all of the brains that I have access to online, and thus I can download onto multiple machines. So I'm keeping multiple machines in sync with the same Brain database. So this brain that I created today is called Results. And so here's my online results brain. You can see I've got many different brain databases that I sync to the cloud. I sync these test brains from time to time. Most of them are real brains that I use in multiple locations or collaborate with others. But here is the online version of this brain. So here's my results brain. I've got my personal area and my business. I can click down through my clients. And let's say I have a new client coming on board. They're named Zed. Oh, if I can type, there we go. So Zed is the name of my new client. Right here in the web interface, I'm adding new thoughts because I am the editor for this particular brain, the administrator of this brain. I can add new notes, so I can go right in, and here is my new note. And I even have the plus tab. So once again, I can upload file attachments and enter, add URL attachments to thoughts in my brain while I'm in the web interface. Now, it's important to point out the desktop application is much more feature-rich than the web client. So if you're looking to edit the brain, we always recommend do most of your brain, if not all of your brain editing, through the web interface, through the desktop client. The web client is great for just quick, easy access to a brain when you're online and don't have access to your machine or what have you. But nonetheless, you can still do some basic functionality from the web client. Then when I return back to the desktop, let me navigate my way back here to my list of clients. And it'll auto sync in the background, but I can also click on sync button to force a new sync. And this Z thought will show up here in just a moment. The notes and any file attachments, there it is, will be over on the notes, etc. So that's one way to get your brain synced to the cloud. Now I can download that brain from any other machine where I install the brain and log in with my account information. Now I can also share this brain with others now that it's been synced to the cloud. So I'm going to click on online and select brain access and sharing. Now previously I already synced this brain, and notice that I'm actually sharing it with Shelley and another colleague, the creator of the brain, Harlan Hugh. He's also an administrator in this particular brain. If I want to add other people, let's say I see someone online, I want to give them read-only access to this brain, and I know they have a brain account, I can type their email address in here. So I'm going to invite, and when I close this window, it'll send a note out to that email address. So you can manually enter individual emails to invite them to see this brain. They'll get a link to see it online, and if they have the brain installed, they would actually be able to download a read-only copy of this brain. So that's one way of sharing your brain. If you don't want to, type in, you don't know their email address, or maybe you just want to tweet out this brain, that amazing brain you've created, to the entire world online, here is the URL that you need. You need to check the option to allow public access. That doesn't mean anyone in the world can just stumble upon your brain. They'd have to know this specific URL. So I copy that URL onto my clipboard. I send it out in a tweet or post it on my Facebook or Instagram, what have you. And I can share that URL, and anyone that has that URL can see this brain online. So those are some great ways to, I want to say no and save. So here's the note saying, hey, we're about ready to send this brain to someone. So it's actually going to send an email out to that email address. Emails are being sent. So they'll receive an email notifying them that they have access to that brain. So that's a really, really great way to share a brain with someone else, whether they have the brain installed or not. If you go all the way up to Team Brain, there was a drop-down box there where I could share my brain with other members of my team. That's called Team Brain. And that's what allowed me to make Shelley a writer and Harlan a co-administrator on this particular brain. So now they're not only seeing my brain, they can modify and have access to my brain. Now I've shared this brain with Shelley. Let's see if she's made any changes. I'm not sure if she has or not, but I'm going to click on the little clock icon over in the corner, and this tells me all recent activity in this particular brain. So I see that Shelley hasn't made any changes yet. But if she has, her picture would appear here, and I could mouse over and see what thoughts Shelley is modifying. In fact, I can jump into, I keep this brain open all the time. This is our brain, our online knowledge base. And we in the support team share links from this brain with the outside world. And it's just a really great how to use the brain built within a brain. So this brain is available online, and notice I can click on the clock icon, And I can see Brigitte recently made some changes. I'll scroll down. There's Peter that made a few updates on changing some notes on sending web pages to BrainBox. So I can scroll back and reflect and find out who's modified which thoughts and when. We've got a whole slew of different tips and tricks and best practices if you are using TeamBrain. And so be sure to contact us at support@thebrain.com if you want to know more about collaborative use of the brain, but I just wanted to share a few of those features with you. And so that being said, we've shared some new features of version 11. I've got one more feature to share with you, and then we'll be at the top of the hour, and we're going to go in and answer any additional questions that have popped up. But the last feature that I want to share with you is a very, very simple feature within the brain, but it really pays off when you start using this feature more frequently. And that's our new icon library. We're having a lot of fun with it. We've had great feedback, great response. Any thought you may notice in brains that we share from time to time, we like to use icons for just that nice visual reference on a particular thought. So if I go down into Delta, and let's say for my contacts, I want a little picture of a person to appear here. Or maybe, Brigitte is the main contact for Delta Corporation. So I can click on this thought to open up the thought properties display. And a couple of things that I can do are just simply change around, make the background sort of a light yellow. I can even make the text sort of a dark purple color. And so you can see that thought is starting to stand out a little bit. Brigitte is the main contact. So I want to know in this cluster of different people connected to this one thought, who's the first person that I should call if I have an urgent message for this customer? So another step that I can take is to simply add an icon. Now I can click and I can capture an image or choose a file if I had a picture of Brigitte that I wanted to post here. I've seen a lot of people that do that in very large organizations. They want to be able to place a face with a name. So they'll go through their corporate database, find an image of Joe Smith, and put that picture there next to his thought in their brain. So I don't have a picture of Brigitte, so I'm going to select a stock icon image. So the icons are completely updated in the Brain 11, much more modern, easy to see, easy to use. And we've got a new interface for selecting these icons. So I can go down and click on animals or business and finance. So, select the category that I want. Or I can even do a search. So I doubt if I type in search for Brigitte, nothing would show up. But if I say person, there we go. Person, you can see I've got personal computers showing up, and here's all these people images as well. So I can search through these over 2,000 images. I can have the brain suggest something for me or a random choice. It'll just randomly pick 200 different images. But here for Brigitte, I'll just pick sort of just a standard person icon. And all that really does for me, once again, is make that one thought stand out a little bit in this cluster of people thoughts, so I can quickly identify or see. I could have also put a star next to that image, or something of that nature to make, or a big number one. She's the first person to contact. So it's your choice, your options, and once again, that image, that content is going to be available online. These are zoomable icons, so you can hover over to see a larger image of that icon that you've selected or customized yourself, etc. And it's just a really great way to enhance your brain as your brain continues to grow and evolve with that just nice visualization of the content that you're looking for. And with that, we ended on sort of one of the fun features of the Brain 11. But Shelley, what other types of questions are we getting out there that we can demo today on the webinar?
All right, great. Well, we're going to move into Q&A. For those of you that have to leave on the hour, we do have this session recorded. If you can stay, we're actually going to go into overtime because we have so many great questions. A lot of them actually came up in your collaboration section. So we're going to continue to go through the Q&A and pick back up. Great demo. Lots of nice examples. But since we just finished collaboration and sharing, I'm going to start with Jean-Pierre's questions, and then we can move on to some other stuff. Jean-Pierre is just asking, with sharing, how do we know who has the links without a Brain account? And so that gets interesting. So obviously, what Matt was showing you was a defined user group. That's TeamBrain, right, where you set up a group within your company and everyone has a Brain account, and then you select people. So that's very controlled information sharing. You decide who does what. Now, if you're a teacher or, you know, an author, you might just want to publish a Brain out there, filmmaker for publicity, free hosting, and you can do that, and then that just becomes like a public website, and you can check that your Brain is unlisted where people don't see it on our site, or you can have it listed and tweeted out, and in that sense it really just becomes like a public intranet page or internet page. So that's just to kind of answer that question. And then Jean-Pierre's next question was, can you pull back a URL if you change your mind on sharing? So yes, a Brain can be maintained just like anything else. So if Matt wants to delete a thought and it's constantly syncing, and he puts out a link, oh, that's, you know, not up to date, let's go ahead and change it, you can, you know, as soon as that syncs, that will disappear. So yeah, the Brain is just as dynamic as it is on your desktop. So I like to remind people when they are sharing and collaborating, you know, if you put something out there, obviously, you know, if you're sharing to a wide audience, you want to maybe, you know, watch or review what you're putting out. But at the same time, yes, it's not like it's just out there and it's a snapshot. It's just as dynamic when it's published as it is when it's private. So if you want to go ahead and delete a thought, edit a thought, you can create that edit. You can have the automatic sync set up so that it automatically captures that change and shares it. And that's actually the best way to share information with the team. As I'm building my Brain, for instance, my sales and business development Brain with my colleague Brigitte, it is constantly syncing. So she's getting that information in real time. And as I'm deleting things, you know, deal doesn't go through, add a client, finish a client, she will see that information. So Matt, I don't know if you have anything more to add or if you want to kind of show everyone the sync options.
Sure. As soon as you sync a Brain, by default, this sync Brain automatically is going to be checked. If for whatever reason you don't want that checked, you want to be in charge of when this Brain syncs and when it doesn't. So you can make a bunch of changes. Then when you like what you've done or created or modified, you can go in and manually sync this Brain. So it's up to you whether you want to keep this option checked or not. And that's right there from the drop-down menu next to the cloud icon, or you can go into online and decide whether you want this Brain syncing automatically. And as Shelley mentioned, you know, if you decide like, oh, I shared this Brain and here was my test thought, and I synced this out and everyone can see this test thought, oh, that shouldn't be there. If I delete it and resync, when someone else visits this Brain online or they sync their Brain, the test thought will no longer be there. So it's keeping the Brain in sync. Every individual thought has its own unique URL, so you can send people directly to a particular location within a Brain, or you can send them to the default Brain itself. And John Pierre's question regarding, you know, if you ever want to like change the URL for a Brain is unique for each individual Brain. So there is a process to take a Brain and make a copy of it. So there's version A and version B. You want to get rid of version A, sort of refresh everything for 2020 and repost as the 2020 version of this Brain. It'll get a new URL. All the thoughts have new GUIDs, global unique IDs, etc. So if you really want that, those are some more advanced features that I'm sort of glossing over. So send a note into support@thebrain.com and we can walk you through that process and share with you in more detail about how those global unique IDs work and Brain URLs, etc.
And then just another question Jean-Pierre and another user had about files and sharing. So I'll just read his question directly. Will they only be able to see files that are stored in the Brain or also on Google Drive links? So that's where, so it's a yes and no. Mostly no if you're publicly sharing. So definitely if you want to share your Brain online and sync those to have those files accessible through the web, then make sure you do store those files internally. The brain isn't magic. The brain is not going to automatically give people access to a file that's sitting on your private hard drive. We can't do that, and we don't want to do that. But the flip side of that is we do have some very cool intranet and TeamBrain examples where the whole user group, like we have a sales team that they have just a very complex SharePoint and network drive, and the whole user's team has access to the SharePoint and the user drive. So there's a brain of relative paths. So in that case, absolutely, just you can link to folders on your company drive, link to an intranet site, provided though that the people that you're sharing with also have access to those drives. So you can really think of the brain as a remote control for information. We do obviously have some dynamic examples with APIs, but out of the box when you're doing our amazing basic TeamBrain sharing, it's just going to point people to where you need them. So if you are sharing with people beyond your company firewall, I suggest you keep those files internal so they can access them. But if you're doing an internal TeamBrain, yeah, there's absolutely no reason why, if you all have access to a particular file drive, you can't just link a thought can't link to that. So it really depends on your application, but just keep that in mind. For public sharing, you absolutely do want to make those files internal. And likewise, if you're across mobile devices and I want to have access to my sales document on my phone, I can't really have it sitting on a separate file on my desktop, or when I'm, not doing too much traveling now, but when I'm outside taking a walk, hiking, I can't look at that file on my phone. So I don't know if, Matt, you have anything more to add in terms of files and file management in a TeamBrain collaboration context.
Sure. There are many options that you have when you're attaching a file to a thought in the brain. Are you going to move the file into the brain? Are you going to copy it in or just create a shortcut? And who else do you want to have access to this brain? Or how do you want to have access to that thought if you're syncing between multiple devices? So I think Shelley covered all those options pretty clearly. I am teaching a Brain 101 class this week, and I go over that. I take some time and go over that in pretty good detail. But very quickly, if you go up to Options and into Preferences on a Mac, that's the Brain Preferences, and on the Behavior tab, you can specify how you want the brain to behave during drag and drop. So if you're dragging and dropping files, are you moving, copying, or linking them into the brain? Once you've moved or copied or linked it into the brain, you can always go back and change it. So you can move or copy or link that file out of the brain as well. But play around with those settings and see what works best for you. But do know that just because you've got a bunch of thoughts that are linked to files that are on your Google Drive or your Dropbox account or what have you, if you share that brain, the other person, once you get to that thought, you're going to be prompted to log in if it's password protected. So if your Google Drive is open to the world, then the file will be there and be accessible. If it's password protected, any user that you've given access to your brain has to log in. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and you can always play around with smaller brains. I remind people, if you're going to be sharing a brain within a community, create a small test brain first and decide what is going to work, what process is going to work. Here's a thought with 3 different attachments. These are linked via a shortcut. These are moved internally. Can the entire team see everything, what's going to work best, and move on from there?
Yeah, and just in terms of some fun TeamBrain examples, you can even take a TV show before you get into classified information. I remember when we were working with the military, this was I think in the 90s, and we mapped out alias rather than actually getting into Homeland Security threats. So you can kind of have fun with it too. So do like and then once you get, your team gets all great at, creating your mock brain. Sometimes the team ends up liking that brain more than the actual brain, but lots of fun ways to do that with the team. So we're happy to help you out in that regard. And then John was asking, can I implement a TeamBrain on my company intranet without connecting internet connection? Yes, Jay replied, that is TeamBrain server. So for those of you that have, that don't want to take advantage of third-party secure data hosting and cloud options, we do have server technology that we can provide you, and that's something that you can write into support or sales about that. And just kind of moving along, there's a couple of people had questions about our beta channel, and Mike was asking, what is the beta channel used for?
Yes, so I did see this come up a couple of times.
And somebody else asked it earlier. Sorry, I'm favoring the people who just put their questions in because there's so much. I'll try and get back up.
Yeah, a lot of questions came in.
I'm just huddling at the bottom here right now. So.
So if you click on Options and go into Preferences, once again on a Mac, TheBrain Preferences, there's also a System tab. And on the System tab, you can select which channel that you want to be on, stable, beta, or alpha. I have a Brain email address, so therefore I've got access to internal channel, which you won't see on your end. But by default, you're on the stable channel. Current build on the stable channel should be 11.0.60. But if you want the latest, greatest from the engineering team at TheBrain, that is build 11.0.67 as of today. And so you can switch over to the alpha channel and get that build. Once we
and you know what, if you're a non-technical user, do this right now. Just plug your ears.
Yeah,
but I
stay on the stable channel.
A lot of you are techies, but if you're not,
the stable channel has been tested. It's working. Yeah, everything's fine. Stay on stable. But if you are looking to push the envelope, you're looking at all the new features.
I think some of these
you can
guys
switch over to those alpha or beta channels. So alpha, internal has tested it. We've moved it to alpha. It goes from alpha to beta and then beta to stable. So choose the channel that works best for you. And send a note into support@thebrain.com if you want to know more details about what criteria we use for selecting which channel. Eventually, everything that comes through on the internal channel makes its way to alpha. Or if we find something along the way, it's dead in the water and the next build comes along. So those are your different choices.
All right, and then this question did pop up. I did ask it, but a couple people are asking it again, so I'm going to bring it up just to make sure we've covered this effectively since there was a lot about notes today. Mark is asking, above the notes section, I see only a reduced menu. How do I get back to the buttons I see on Matt's Brain notes? And we did have that pop up. I think you did kind of address it, but it's coming up again, so I want to make sure people can take advantage of that and see how to get that menu back.
Yeah, first off, Mark, all the features that I have, all the buttons I have, you have on the collapsed or condensed menu in drop-down menus. So there's going to be a little arrow, or there's going to be, we call it the hamburger button, the 3 horizontal lines. However, if you get back into preferences on the notes editor, you can turn on and off the compact toolbars. So you probably have this feature checked, compact toolbars. So as you can see, there's drop-down menus to get to many of the other features, but they're all there. I like having all the buttons there all the time. It just takes up, for me and my display, it takes up one more row. That's not a lot of screen real estate, so I keep this unchecked. And I've got individual buttons for all of those features.
I like seeing those buttons there too.
Yeah, that's once again on the preferences, and they're cool little buttons, so they work really really well.
All right. Okay, and if somebody asks it a third time, we'll demo it again. Now, Steve has a question. I have my Brain on a home machine and use my iPad at work to access on my online Brain. I must be careful about sharing company-only data, inadvertently putting this in my Brain. Any suggestions on how to handle this?
Yeah, that's that's really up to you. We can't tell people what you should put into your Brain and what you shouldn't. Everyone has their own corporate rules. Many companies we know out there say, oh, you can't put any data onto a server that their company doesn't own, and that's why we created TeamBrain Server, where it's when you click on that sync button, instead of syncing up to app.thebrain.com, you're syncing to www.myprivateserver-sitting-next-to-my-desk.com. So that's TeamBrain Server. Send a note into us at support if you want to know more about installing TeamBrain Server for your organization. That being said, we've got some really great security on app.thebrain.com and the sync process. I won't go into all the details, but your password is salted and hashed and not accessible by any administrators of the brain server on our end, which means myself being an administrator, I can see that, Joe Smith at gmail.com has an account. They've synced some brains. I can't open those brains. I can't see what they are. Even if they're publicly shared or publicly accessible, I still need to know that URL in order to visit the brain online. So we're very happy about our security. The upload, the storage, the download, it's all SEA, encrypted, et cetera, et cetera. So it's up to you to decide what you're comfortable with. And that's another reason why sometimes people put their data on a secured site, Dropbox, maybe their X drive at their company that is password protected and they can, log into. So that you keep the file there, and the brain is just a navigation tool with your notes that point to the file, which is hosted somewhere else. So that's another argument for creating shortcuts in your brain rather than having a file attachment. That being said, because you brought up the fact of you access your brain on your phone, or on your iPad, so do I. I like to use my phone more than an iPad, but here I'm opening up the Brain application. There it went right into my personal brain, and it went to a recipe. It's my wife's birthday this weekend, so I'm looking up the cake recipe. And so here I have notes. If I click on the notes section, there's a little bit of glare on the screen there, but you can see that's my basic ganache frosting. And I can come back to the cake. Oh, and there I've got a nice zoomable image of the cake that I hope to recreate. But nonetheless, all available to me in my brain. We've got an iOS app and an Android app. So anything that you put into your brain, sync it to the cloud, you can access from your mobile device as well. And that's just a really valuable tool. My entire brain that I've created both for professionally, for work, and on a personal level, I take with me wherever I go. My organic brain forgets everything, but my digital brain never forgets. And it's on my phone, and it's with me wherever I go, so I can look up a phone number, a recipe, pull open a contract, etc. So it's up to you to decide what you want to go into that brain. If you want to know more about our security on app.thebrain.com, just send us a note at support@thebrain.com. Like I said, we're proud of it. We're very happy with it. We've never had any problems, knock on wood, and we'll share all those details about security with you.
And then, Steve, it also sounded like for you it was almost just more process remembering because you had two different brains. So what I would also suggest, and I don't know if you've kind of seen this, a lot of my brains were blue today. I don't know. I guess I pulled out all my blue brains. But I would also suggest, so if you've got your business brain that has, I guess, your classified information, and then your personal brain, a different wallpaper, and I know this sounds superficial, but they're very powerful for shifting context. We talked about focus and context, and I don't know how many users, even now when you're stressed out, like put a nice background of an ocean or a mountain range behind that brain, even if it's your business brain, and it's like a view, right? So you'll have a nice there's ways to tweak it. We cover that in the Brain 101 class that Matt hosts every Friday. But I guess if you are kind of building and adding information quickly and shifting between multiple brains, I definitely recommend that each brain has its own distinct wallpaper or at least color. So maybe you have the white colored brain for your corporate brain, and your home brain maybe has a darker shade. Just so you have an immediate visual to know, oh, I'm in one brain or the other. That could also be quite helpful for you, I think.
And I should share, there's a new feature in the Brain 11, which is great for this because maybe you've got a wallpaper that you really, really like, but you want to just have a unique image. Blue, we call these thumbnails, blue brain thumbnails for business and red brain thumbnails for personal information. You can actually click on the little hamburger button that's associated with every brain that you have. Click on the hamburger button from your brain list and select to set a brain icon. So you can select a specific image for that icon, for that thumbnail, but that icon will not be the wallpaper. So you keep your wallpaper, and you've got a customized icon for that particular brain. And maybe the icon is just a big, image that says top secret or work only or what have you. So you can really play around with that quite a bit to make the application work best for you, so you know which are your business brains, which are your recreational brains, etc.
All right, we're going to do a couple more questions. Actually, Willie's asking, we're late into the seminar due to change in summer hour, and can I get a recording? Yes, this will be recorded. So we're going to continue just for another 5 minutes. There are a lot of questions, but if you do have to run, do feel, we want to be respectful of your time boundaries as well. Feel free to hop off, and we will email everyone a recording of this session. Of course, we're happy to continue to chat for another 5 to 10 minutes and just get a few more of these questions, as long as you're okay. How are you doing for time, Matt? We have quite a few questions in the hopper, so we'll do a couple more.
Yeah, I see one, so I'm going to nab it in case you don't get to it. And the person's asking about linking between brains. So now that we're talking about multiple brains.
That's Daryl's question. I had that. I have that one high. I was going to say, but I want to get to Daryl's question. Yeah, we love linking. And there's somebody else who asked earlier about splitting a brain apart. So anyway, start with Daryl's, and I'm going to find that user's question earlier.
So
and I'm like, I want to
talk about linking between brains, specifically from one thought to another. So now I've got this really great community outreach thought. I don't want to recreate all of this because it is pertinent to, or it is being referenced in another brain that I have. Maybe it's another project I'm working on and we want to create something similar to what we've done for Delta Corporation's community outreach. So rather than copy everything and paste it into this other brain, I'm going to right-click and select to copy local thought URL. So all I'm getting is just a link to this thought in this specific brain. I'm actually going to navigate away from this thought. I'm going to close the brain, so my results brain is no longer open. I don't want to modify that brain. I'm going to open up another sample brain that I have, eSolutions Consulting, and find the thought in here where I want to reference or have a link to. Here I've Delta Corporation is being purchased by Instant Dynamics, another corporation I'm working with. And now underneath this Delta Corp, you can see I've got my community outreach. This is where I started my sample. I'm going to delete this thought. So there we go. Let's permanently delete that thought. So I did this test earlier. So there's my Delta Corporation. I don't want a new thought. I want to link to the other thought that I've already created. I right-click in the background and select Paste Web Link. So there you can see is the thought. It's a link back to another brain. And when I click to launch or click the icon to launch, it's going to open the appropriate brain and take me to the appropriate thought. So that's opening in the background. We'll give that just a moment, and there it is. So it's linking from one thought to another, and that's the copy local thought URL. So that's how we can link from one thought in brain A to another location in brain B. And even back and forth from here, I can go back into my eSolutions brain and say, let's say Instant Dynamics, since they're purchasing Delta, I right-click and copy local thought URL. And in my results brain, Delta, right-click, and I'll paste. So here's my link to Instant Dynamics. Maybe I want to make that a jump thought so I can go back and forth. So I can get from brain A to brain B back and forth with those local URL thought links. Now, I believe, Shelley, the next question was copying a section of a brain or taking a brain and segmenting it out into topic-specific.
There were a couple, somebody earlier, and I can't remember their name, and I can't find it in the Q&A, asked about actually making a brain smaller, taking a portion of it, and then creating a new brain. And then David, I stumbled on David's question where he says, how do I copy a thought and all its children and data to create a new brain? So those are kind of similar questions where I also want to make sure everyone's aware of our mass select feature and clicking on gates to copy those thoughts. And then whether you're copying thoughts and just putting them in a new brain to create a new brain, or you're going back to the old brain and then deleting the other thoughts, the processes are the same. So I'll let Matt go ahead and cover that for David and the other
Sure.
user who's looking to condense a brain and separate it.
Yeah, and this is a more advanced feature of the Brain application, but one that's important to point out that the capabilities are there, because when a person typically first starts off with the Brain, one of the most common questions we get is, should I create one massive brain with everything, or smaller topic-specific brains and jump in between them? As you've seen from my brain list, I like to create smaller topic-specific brains. Sometimes I merge them together. Sometimes I make a brain that's too big for that topic and I divide it up. So both capabilities are possible, merging brains or segmenting brains. So let's start with segmenting. Here I've got all my different clients, but maybe my Delta client was looking over my shoulder one day in a meeting saying, hey, this is great. This is all of our information. Could I get a copy of this? They sure can, but I'm not going to send them my information on alpha, beta, epsilon, gamma, etc. So I'm going to control-click on Delta. I'll start with that. And notice that opens up the selection box over on the left. I can control-click on a gate to copy all of those connected thoughts into the selection box. If I control-click on a thought that now has, we call these the marching ants, the little highlight that you see animating around the thought. If I control-click on a thought that is selected, it removes it from the selection box. So you can see there's many different ways I can even control and drag a square around a grouping of thoughts to add them in. And finally, as far as building out the selection box, I can click on Edit up above and select related thoughts. Now I'm saying, all right, from Delta, let's go 5 generations down, childward, and add those to my selection box. So now I've added everything 5 generations below Delta into my selection box. So many different ways to populate that selection box, play around with those features, and it's not a problem. If you mess up, you add something you shouldn't, you can control-click to get rid of it, or control-click again to add it back in. Now, also, I would point out that at this point on a Mac, you would be clicking on Command and then clicking on the thought. On a Windows machine, it's control-click. So now that I've populated this selection box, I'm simply going to right-click. A lot of options you can go choose from here. This is a really great feature if you're selecting a group of thoughts to apply a thought type or apply a thought tag, or you want to delete them from your brain completely. So in this scenario, I'm simply copying the thoughts. I can also copy an outline if I'm turning in a report and I want a text-based outline of a grouping of thoughts in my brain. But for this example, copied my 13 thoughts, so now I have them on my clipboard, and I should point out I have everything on my clipboard. The notes, the file attachments, all of the customized icons or images, anything associated with these thoughts. It's all copied onto my clipboard. I can even close this. And now I'm going to click on File, and I'll just create a new brain rather than paste. I tried pasting into another brain that I already had that thought there earlier. So now I'm creating a new brain called Just Delta. Now, when you create a new brain, as you're about to see, the brain will randomly select one of our different themes. We've got a lot of different themes built in, some very, very fun and interesting themes to help you, as Shelley mentioned out, give your brains individual identities. If you don't like the theme, you can just select a new one, and you can always return to this window and change it later. So I'll just go back to the light blue. That's sort of the default setting for the brain, one of the original backgrounds we had. And I'm going to right-click on the background. I still have those 13 thoughts on my clipboard. I select Paste, and I'll end up with, there's that Delta thought. There's all its child thoughts down below. The notes are there. If I go into my project, there's my community outreach, my document attachments, my notes, etc. Everything is there. This brain, we talked about this earlier, giving a brain a new identity. This brain has its own unique URL. If I share this brain, separate from the other one. It's a copy, and it's completely has its own identity. Now I can share this brain with Delta Corporation in a number of ways. I could zip it up. If I know they're using the Brain application, I click on File, back up to Brain Archive, and I compact this brain into a single file to send to my colleague, or I sync it up to the cloud and send them the URL. So I can share this smaller brain without fear that I've just shared all my information on my other customers or my own personal information. So that's how we take a brain and we, a large brain, and we segment out a smaller sort of section of that brain. If I want to merge two brains really quickly, I would click on File, and I'm going to back this entire brain up into an archive. There's some important radio buttons. I can keep it password protected with my login information, or anyone can extract the data. So I'll put this out on my desktop. I'll say backup. And now my just delta brain is going to be a BRZ file. There it is on my desktop. And now I can go into another brain, any brain, and select File, Import, and I can import a BRZ. So that's how we merge two brains together. The original just delta brain is still there, but I'm merging the backup that I made of it into another brain. And before you merge a brain in, again, you can either create a new brain with this or add to your current open brain. So that's what I would do for merging.
All right, great. And we are now 30 minutes into overtime. So I think with that, we're going to close today's session. I want to thank you all for your, first of all, there's a number of you, a large group still on our call. So thanks for listening to us and participating in all the great questions. If we haven't got to your question, there were a lot of questions. We'll look at the log and we'll try and get support to get back to you. But you can also, we have chat, free support to all users, chat into our website. We also, a number of you were asking about, how to set up your brain, even if you couldn't figure out, how to get Matt's notes the way he got them. We offer free web one-on-ones to everyone, so you can actually chat in and we can look at your brain and make suggestions, and that's free support, whether you're on the free or the paid version. And then the Brain 101 class this Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, Matt is hosting. It's a much smaller, intimate class, so 100% of those questions do get answered, so feel free to use that as a resort. And if you want to just come on at the end of the class, pop in and out to get a question demoed or to see what Matt's talking about to the group, we have users that pop in regularly and, of course, a lot of new users. So that's another resource for you. So with that, I think we're going to end today's session. But before we do, Matt, any final words of wisdom or questions or anything that you wanted to get out that we haven't covered in this marathon Brain 11 and knowledge capture session, where I think we captured a lot of knowledge.
I think we did, and it was a lot of information. So I'll end with reminding everyone, have no fear. You can always go back and modify how content is associated with a thought. You can delete content. You can rearrange it. All those editing capabilities are there. So don't let anything hold you back from the brain that you're going to create. It's an ongoing process, and as time goes by and your brain evolves, you can go back in and tweak and modify to get the digital representation of your own organic brain that you're looking for.
All right, great. And I haven't published our next session, but check back on the website. In 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to have a whole session focused on the art and zen of productivity. So if you like the beginning stuff we covered on focus, that's our next topic. So we'll try and get that up so that we can send the link out to all of you. You guys will all also be getting the recording. The recording will be posted on thebrain.com homepage tomorrow. And, obviously, so will the next topic. And you can also sign up for the 101 on that as well. So with that, I'd like to wish you all and hope you all stay focused and get results with your brain, and hope to see you again on another Brain Technologies webinar. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.